Explanation of the book, The 80/20th Rule for Success by Richard Koch. Introduction to the book, The Power of the 80/20th Rule in Achieving Success. This book is based on the Pareto Principle, a simple but revolutionary idea that 80% of results come from 20% of causes. Although this percentage may not always be accurate, it is a general rule that applies to almost all areas of life, from success in business and marketing to achieving personal happiness. Author Richard Koch explains that the key to success lies not only in hard work, but in focusing on the few things that make the greatest impact. By applying the 80/20th rule, anyone can double their productivity and achieve success with minimal effort. Chapter 1. What is the 80/20th rule and how does it work? 1.1 Origin and History of the Rule. The rule goes back to the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto in the 19th century, who observed that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. Later, it was discovered that this pattern is repeated in many areas. 80% of the world's wealth is owned by 20% of the population. 80% of sales come from 20% of customers. 80% of problems in business come from 20% of mistakes. 1.2. Why is this rule important? If you understand that a small amount of effort achieves the majority of results, you can focus your time and energy on the things that make a real difference. Instead of trying to work on everything, you can focus on the things that have the most impact. Chapter 2. How to use the 80/20th rule in your personal life. 2.1. Manage your time smartly. People often think that working long hours leads to success, but in reality, 20% of the activities we do each day achieve 80% of the achievements. How do you apply this? Identify the 20% of tasks that achieve 80% of your results. Focus on these tasks first, then eliminate or delegate the less impactful tasks. Example: if you are a student, you will find that 20% of the information is responsible for 80% of the exam questions. So focus on this information instead of trying to study everything. 2.2. Improve quality of life and relationships. 20% of the people in your life give you 80% of the support and happiness. 20% of the activities you do give you 80% of the psychological satisfaction. Focus on the relationships and activities that add value to you and ignore the rest. 2.3. Reduce stress and increase psychological comfort. Identify the 20% of the things that cause 80% of your stress, then work on reducing or avoiding them. Example: if social media is causing you stress, try to reduce your use of it. Chapter 3. The 80/20th Rule in Work and Productivity. 3.1. How to achieve great results with less effort. At work, 20% of employees generate 80% of the output, and 20% of the tasks generate 80% of the success. So instead of trying to do everything, focus on the work that has the greatest impact. Practical tips. Identify the 20% of customers who bring in 80% of the profits and pay more attention to them. Focus on the products or services that generate the most profits. Don't waste your time on unnecessary meetings or unimportant tasks. 3.2. Delegate and work smart. If you are a leader or entrepreneur, you don't need to do everything yourself. Delegate the less important tasks to others and focus on the most impactful things. Chapter 4. The 80/20th Rule for Wealth and Investment. 4.1. How to build wealth with less effort. 80% of profits come from 20% of investments. 20% of good financial habits can bring you 80% of financial stability. Examples of the rule in money and investing. 80% of stock market returns come from 20% of stocks. 80% of income comes from 20% of customers or sources of income. 80% of the unnecessary spending comes from 20% of bad habits. How to benefit from it. Focus on the most profitable investments. Stop unnecessary spending on things that do not add real value to your life. Invest your time in learning high-income skills. Chapter 5. The 80/20th Rule in Building Personal Relationships. 5.1. How to make your social life happier. 20% of the people in your life give you 80% of your emotional support and happiness. 80% of social problems come from 20% of negative people. 5.2. How to use the rule to develop your relationships. Focus on real, supportive relationships. Limit your time with people who cause you stress or negative energy. Chapter 6. Self-development using the 20/80th rule. 6.1. How to learn any skill quickly. 20% of the effort in learning gives you 80% of the benefit. Focus on the basics of any skill, then develop it gradually. Example: when learning a new language, you can learn 20% of the most used words, and you will be able to understand 80% of the conversations. 6.2. How to improve your health and fitness. 20% of exercises achieve 80% of the results. 20% of healthy foods give you 80% of the nutritional benefits. Focus on basic exercises such as compound body exercises instead of wasting time on ineffective exercises. Chapter 7. How to become an expert in the 20/80th rule. 7.1. Reanalyze your life based on the rule. Identify 20% of the things that bring you 80% of success and happiness. Reduce the time and energy you waste on unimportant things. Focus on the few things that make a real difference in your life. 7.2. Testing the rule in your daily life. Ask yourself daily, what is the one thing I can do today that will bring the most benefit? Continue to improve your mindset and work smarter instead of ineffective hard work. Conclusion. Smarter work is better than harder work. The 80/20th rule teaches us that success does not depend on effort alone, but on focusing your effort in the right places. Whether you want to optimize your time, build wealth, improve your relationships, or develop yourself, focusing on the 20% of things that achieve 80% of the results is the key to true success. What do you think of the rule? Real stories that explain the 80/20th rule in success in life. The 80/20th rule is not just a theoretical principle, but has been used by many people and companies to achieve tremendous success. Here are some real stories that show how this principle can change the lives of individuals and businesses. 1. The story of Bill Gates and Microsoft focus on the most successful products. When Bill Gates started Microsoft, he did not try to make software for all fields, but rather focused on the most important 20% of the products that the market needed, which were responsible for 80% of the success. How did he apply the 80/20th rule? At first, he focused on operating systems as he realized that the biggest profit would come from this category. He made a deal with IBM to use the MS-DOS operating system and succeeded in making Microsoft dominant in the market. Later, he focused on the Windows system, which became responsible for 80% of the company's profits. Result: instead of trying to develop dozens of products, he focused on one main product that led to unprecedented success. 2. The story of Steve Jobs and Apple's success reducing products and focusing on efficiency. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, he found that the company was producing a large number of products, but they were not achieving great success. So he decided to use the 80/20th rule. How did he apply the rule? He canceled 80% of the products that Apple was working on because they were not profitable. He focused only on the 20% of the products that achieved the highest sales, such as Macs and iPhones. He made product design simpler and more effective, instead of producing a large number of devices. Result: Apple became one of the most valuable companies in the world, and Jobs revolutionized the technology industry because of his focus on the most successful products. 3. Warren Buffett's story. Invest 20% in stocks that make 80% of profits. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in history, did not distribute his money to a large number of stocks, but rather focused on a very few companies that were responsible for most of his profits. How did he apply the rule? Instead of buying shares in hundreds of companies, he focused on 20% of strong companies, such as Coca-Cola, Apple, and Bank of America. He realized that 80% of profits come from 20% of successful investments, so he invested in companies that have a strong financial foundation. He did not care about short-term stocks, but focused on long-term investments. The result? He became one of the richest men in the world because he understood that a few correct investments can bring him most of the profits. 4. The story of a small businessman focused on the most profitable customers. Ahmed, the owner of an online store, was facing a problem in making profits. He was spending a lot of time trying to meet the needs of all customers, but he was not achieving the desired success. How did he apply the 20-80th rule? After analyzing the sales, he discovered that 80% of his profits came from only 20% of customers. He started focusing on these special customers, offering them exclusive offers in better services. Instead of trying to please everyone, he focused on the category that brought him the highest income. The result? His store's profits doubled, even though he reduced unnecessary efforts. 5. The story of a university student focusing on the most important 20% of information. Sarah is a university student who had difficulty in her studies because she was trying to study everything, but she was not achieving good grades. How did she apply the 20-80th rule? Instead of trying to study 100% of the material, she focused on 20% of the content that covers 80% of the questions in the exam. I read summaries and focused on the topics that the professors repeat in the exams. I used the previous questions to identify the most important parts to focus on. The result? Her performance in the exams improved, and she started achieving higher grades with less effort. 6. The story of an athlete improving performance with less effort. Ali, a football player, was training for long hours every day, but he did not see a significant improvement in his performance. How did he apply the 20-80th rule? He realized that only 20% of the training affects 80% of his performance in matches. He started focusing on improving his fitness, speed, and shooting accuracy instead of training everything. He devoted more time to analyzing his previous matches to find out his weaknesses, and instead of random training, he focused on the aspects he really needed. The result? His level improved significantly, and he was able to join a stronger team. 7. The story of a small restaurant increasing profits by reducing dishes. Youssef, a restaurant owner, was offering a menu containing 40 different items, but he was not making good profits. How did he apply the 20-80th rule? He discovered that 80% of profits come from only 20% of the dishes. He eliminated unprofitable dishes and focused only on the most requested dishes. He invested in improving the quality of these dishes and reducing costs on unordered dishes. The result? His profits increased because his focus became on providing successful dishes instead of dispersing efforts on a long menu. Conclusion: how can you apply the 20-80th rule in your life? At work, focus on 20% of the tasks that achieve 80% of the results. In money, focus on 20% of the investments that achieve 80% of the profits. In studying, focus on 20% of the information that appears in 80% of the exams. In relationships, make sure to spend your time with 20% of the people who give you 80% of your happiness. In sports, focus on 20% of the training that affects 80% of your level. Question for you: which story did you like the most? And do you see that you apply the 20-80th rule in your life without noticing?